Welcome back to part 2 of my easy to build homemade ventilation device. I handed this over now to a friend of mine who has a medical education, and he made some suggestions to improve it. First of all, what I'm missing on my device is a so-called PEEP valve. It's a plastic valve that goes onto the bag here, and what it does is it sustains a little bit of pressure after the exhale cycle of the patient. It's actually called a positive end expiratory pressure valve. So what this does is prevent the lung of the patient from collapsing completely after each cycle. So as you can see, the bag is actually collapsing all the way like the balloon, and if I had a valve that would slow this down a little bit here, then the lung of the patient would never be completely collapsing, and that's what the PEEP valve is for. The next thing I did is adjust the breathing volume. The breathing volume of my first construction was too big, so I reduced the breathing volume to the right amount. And the breathing volume of a patient is actually calculated by his tallness, which leads to a norm weight, and the norm weight leads to a lung volume, but the breath volume is a lot smaller than the lung volume. And for an adult woman, the breath volume should be about 360 milliliters. So what I did is I shortened my piston plate here to about 70 millimeters, and that was the size when I actually reached the 360 milliliters in breath volume. Now, how do you measure how much breath volume your ventilator is actually producing? You do that by hooking up a balloon to the connector of your bag, and then you let your machine run very slowly, so you got enough time to remove the balloon at the right moment. So when the balloon is all the way inflated, you take it off, and then I got a water jar here that I filled up with water to 500 milliliters, and now I'm gonna dip the balloon inside the water to see how much volume it's displacing. So my balloon is about 860, which means I have 360 milliliters above my 500 milliliter margin. So it's exactly right, the right breathing volume for an adult woman. Now, to adjust the breathing volume for an adult man, you have to add about 60 milliliters in breathing volume. And to do that, I made this adjustment plate. It's a 7 millimeter plate that I just drop in here. And what it does, it reduces the room that the bag has, and therefore increases the breathing volume by about 60 milliliters. So it's producing now 420 milliliters of breathing volume per stroke. Another thing I noticed while letting this run for quite a long time is that it produced some noise and that was due to the friction where my little crankshaft is mounted here. So a little bit of oil or grease helps a lot to reduce noise. He also checked on the frequency that can be reached. Here in my case the max frequency is about 60 RPM, which is more than enough. For a usual corona patient you would go from 15 to about 30 pulses per minute. So my device covers this whole range. I'm gonna make an assembly video now as well, and I'm also gonna update my plans with all the modifications. And if you have any suggestions or any comments, please write them below and let me know what you think of the improvements.